I want to start this off with saying, I don't want to believe any of this is real. Honestly, I've come here looking for a logical explanation to explain this all away. I'm spiritual, sure, but I'm also a skeptic, and I'm not going to believe every little thing is paranormal. Anyways, I'll get on to the story. I, now 18, was around 12 when this all started. I was laying in my bed when I saw something in the window. It took me a bit of time to realize what it was, but once I did, I could see it was a face. I sat there looking at it for a while, then it shifted from something female to male, and lastly to something deformed and terrifying. I ran out of my room and slept in the living room that night. I want to add this all up to maybe it was the lights being weird and I saw things that weren't there. Except for every night after that, I heard tapping on my window. It wasn't plants or bugs or pets. I checked again and again. Every night as it grew dark, there would be tapping on my window like a knife was tapping against it. Then the tapping turned into scraping, clawing noises that happened almost every night for months. I even FaceTimed friends and they heard it over the call. I had my parents check outside, but nobody was there. This happened for months. It was scary, but I got used to it, because nothing else happened. On my 13th birthday, my best friend came over to my house for my party. We went to the backyard to talk. It had started getting dark outside, and I kept feeling weird. I kept staring at the trees just outside the chain fence of my backyard. I told my best friend I felt creeped out, and she said she felt the same thing and had been staring at the same area. This was also when she told me of a couple of experiences she'd been having. I hadn't told her about mine, but what she said matched a lot to what I had been going through. But they didn't happen as often to her, only maybe once or twice. She lived 20 minutes away and near a more wooded area than I did. There was a little woods behind my house, but it was more like a greenway than woods. This next part is why I've been struggling to write this off as fake. We both, at the same time, saw this inhumanly long figure sprint on all fours across the yard. I mean, it was long. It was pale white and very skinny. I pushed my best friend inside the house and locked the door, because I wasn't about to be killed by some horror movie monster. We both needed some time to calm down, and I made sure we both saw the same thing, because I didn't want to believe what I had seen. But she did. Her description of the thing matched with mine. If you've ever Googled pictures of the Rake, it looked kind of like that. After that, the tapping and clawing at my window got worse, until about a month later when my aunt broke her arm. So I went to her house for a month to help her around the place as it healed. And when I came back, it all stopped. No more tapping, no more sights, nothing at all. I'm aware of how this must sound, and most people will have a hard time believing it. I need for somebody to hear my story because it's been on my mind for years. Is there any way I could just write this off as an animal sighting? I've seen a lot of stories that have made me think, what if something like that actually happened to me? Well, last week something did. I'm not saying it was paranormal or cryptid or whatever, but I can't explain it either. A bit about me first. I'm in my mid-30s, work in IT, and spend most of my day in front of a screen. I've never been particularly outgoing. I've got colleagues I talk to at work, but no real friends outside of it. Earlier this year, I made a promise to myself to start getting out more, even if it's awkward at first. I thought joining some kind of group would be a good way to meet people without having to force small talk in pubs. A few weeks back, I was at the petrol station off the A460 when I saw a notice board near the door. Someone had pinned a flyer for a Cannock Chase social cycle, all levels welcome ride. They meet at Marquee Drive Visitor Center on Thursdays, around 6:30 in the evening. It sounded perfect. Outdoors, casual, and a way to talk to people that didn't involve shouting over music. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was a teenager, but I always heard it was one of those things you never forget. I found an old hybrid bike on Facebook Marketplace, a bit rough around the edges, but it shifted gears fine and didn't wobble. The guy I bought it from said he used to commute with it before buying an e-bike. I gave the tires a pump, wiped off the dust, and called it good enough. When Thursday came, I drove up to the car park near Marquee Drive about 6:15. There were maybe a dozen people gathered already. A mix of middle-aged blokes in proper cycling gear, and a few casual riders like me. Everyone was friendly enough, and the atmosphere was relaxed. The organizer, a woman in her 40s wearing a fluorescent vest, explained they'd be taking one of the disused colliery trails that looped through the woods and back. About an hour's ride, steady pace, and no one left behind. That last part turned out to be not entirely true. We set off just after 6:30. I ended up next to a guy named Mark, early 40s maybe. Wore a well-kept beard, and was the sort of cheerful person who's easy to talk to. He said he worked in logistics, and did the ride every week to keep him sane. We chatted as we pedaled along the gravel paths, him pointing out old mining landmarks and where the deer sometimes come out at dusk. About 20 minutes in, I started to realize just how out of shape I was. My thighs were burning, and every incline felt like climbing up a hill made of treacle. I tried to keep up, but the group was spreading out ahead. Then, right as I was shifting gears, the chain slipped off. I stopped to fix it while Mark slowed down. I told him to go ahead so he didn't lose the others, and he said he'd see me at the end of the trail. It took me a couple of minutes, my fingers made black with grease, but I managed to get the chain back on. I figured I wouldn't catch up with the group with how my legs felt, so I might as well enjoy the ride at my own pace. The woods were quiet by then, except for the sound of tires crunching over the gravel and the occasional bird call. I could smell damp earth and pine. It was cooling off fast, that kind of twilight where it's still light enough to see the path, but the shadows between trees start looking solid. That's when I heard it, a long high-pitched squeal, sharp enough to make me stop pedaling. It came from somewhere off to my right, deep in the trees. My first thought was that it must be some sort of bird, or maybe a fox. I'd never spent much time in the woods, so I didn't really know what was normal. I kept riding, but slower, keeping an ear out for any more sounds. A minute later, I heard huffing noises, short, heavy bursts, like an animal rooting around. They sounded closer than before. I shone my phone's torch toward the trees. The beam didn't reach far, but enough to light up ferns and tree trunks. The noises stopped when I did that. It was properly dark now. The group must have been long gone, and there weren't any other cyclists around. I tried to shake it off and keep going, but the sound started again, this time behind me. There was more huffing, like something big breathing through its nose. The gravel crunched once or twice as if something had stepped onto the trail. I turned around fast, the light from my phone wobbling everywhere. There was nothing visible. Must have been the wind moving through branches, I thought. I started pedaling harder, trying not to look back. The noises followed for a bit at first from a distance, then closer, then fading again. I told myself it was just deer, or maybe a wild boar. There have been sightings of them apparently. But it didn't sound like hooves. It sounded more like someone walking. Then I saw the bushes move up ahead, just off the trail. The leaves were shaking. Something big was pushing through them. I stopped dead, pulled my phone out again, and aimed the light. For a split second, I saw something stand up. It rose out of the brush fast, must have been 7 feet tall if it was a foot. The body shape looked human, or at least close. Broad shoulders, long arms, but the head, which I only caught as it turned away, had the shape that was more animal than man. Whether it was more pig-like or dog-like, I couldn't tell. It was over before I could even focus. It ran off into the woods, crashing through the undergrowth with a force that didn't sound like any deer I'd ever heard. I paused there, breathing hard, my light shaking across the empty trail. Then something in my brain kicked in, and I realized I had to get out of there. I don't think I've ever pedaled that fast in my life. My legs were on fire, but I didn't care. I kept going until I started seeing the lights from the visitor center again. By the time I rolled into the car park, the others were already packing up. Mark asked if I'd taken a wrong turn. I must have looked a mess because he asked if I was all right. I told him I got lost fixing the chain and rode a different loop. I didn't say anything about what I saw. When I got home, I tried to reason out what I had seen. Some of the solutions I came up with were a wild boar rearing up, or a trick of the light. None of those sit well with me though, because neither of them explain it all thoroughly. I like things nice and tidy, and those answers don't put everything into a pretty little package. I know Cannock Chase has all sorts of weird stories. The so-called pig man, black-eyed children, even big cat sightings. I never paid any attention to them before. Now I'm going over them to see if they might answer my questions. I've been back to Marquee Drive during the day since then, to prove to myself it's a normal place. And it is. It's full of dog walkers, families, and cyclists. I haven't been on another group ride yet, but maybe I will. The funny thing is, as much as it scared me, that night also gave me this strange sense of being alive again, like I'd finally stepped out of the hole I'd been stuck in. But the next time I go cycling, I think I'll stick to daylight. There's something that's been prowling around my property for a good while now, and I haven't a clue on how to handle it. I'm 99% sure I know what it is. I just don't know who it is and why it's chosen my land. The first time I knew something was wrong, it was the middle of the night. I'd gone to bed around 11, and I was deep enough under that I didn't immediately register what woke me up. Then I heard it again, a sound like the end of the world was happening in my stables. The horses were losing their minds, neighing like I'd never heard before. And there was also the kicking. I could hear hooves hitting the walls, the wooden beams shaking even from inside the house. That might be a little hyperbole, but you get the picture. I threw on my boots without bothering with socks and ran out there. The Utah night was cold on my face, and for a moment, I stood in the stable door just looking. Trigger, my oldest gelding, was still pacing the length of his stall, and his coat dark with sweat. The others were calmer now that I was there, but they were still breathing hard, still watching the dark beyond the stable doors like they were expecting something to come walking through. I checked everything inside and out, and there was nothing there. I looked to see if a cougar or some coyotes had come through. There were no signs of any kind of wildlife. The fence line was still intact. I stood out there for a good 20 minutes, listening to the desert to make sure whatever it was that spooked the horses didn't return. Then went back in and ran a hand down each horse's neck, whispering to them the way I always do. By the time I got back to the house, I was utterly confused what made my horses act up. I'm 42, and I've been working with horses since I was a girl. I bought this place 8 years ago, 40 acres about 15 miles outside of town. It's good land and usually quiet. I've seen horses spook 1,000 times. I've seen them bolt at a plastic bag, buck at their shadows. That kind of behavior is normal. But this was different, and I knew it even then. 4 days later, I was taking Copper out on the trail to the east, getting him used to the saddle and the feel of a rider. He's a younger quarter horse, good bloodlines, and he'd been going calm for the first couple of weeks. We were maybe a mile from the house when something shifted in him. His ears went back, and before I could even adjust my weight in the saddle, he was bucking like I'd shocked him. It was all I could do to hold on, and I'm not some greenhorn. I've ridden through worse. But Copper was beyond reason. He was bucking hard and high, spinning, doing everything he could to get me off. I was thinking this whole time about my right knee, about what would happen if I came off at the wrong angle, and I was just trying to keep my seat and steady him down. When he finally started to tire, I got off and checked him over. There wasn't even as much as a bee sting or a thorn, no reason at all that I could find for him to act like that. But his eyes were wild. I stood there holding his reins for a solid minute, watching him breathe, and I realized I'd never seen a young horse that scared before. Spooked, sure, but nothing like this. I walked him back nice and slow and didn't push him again that day. Then came the night that everything started to make a little more sense. It was early evening, maybe 5:30 or 6. I'd already fed the horses and was sitting on my porch with a beer, watching the light go amber across the fields. I couldn't place why, but I felt anxious. The kind of tension that starts in your stomach and makes your legs feel restless. I chalked it up to the day. I'd been breaking a new saddle in and my shoulders were aching. Then the horses started again. Not as bad as that first night, but I could hear them moving around in their stalls, hear the edges of distress in their whinnies. I set down my beer and walked out toward the stables, and that's when I saw it. A coyote about 200 yards out. It was running across the far end of the property, moving fast, heading toward the pile of old farm equipment I've been meaning to clean up for years. There's just a bunch of old disc harrows, a broken corn planter, and metal that's turned rust red in the weather. The coyote was thin and mangy looking even from a distance, but it was the way that it was moving that got me. It was looking around like it was trying to see if anyone was watching. I was half hidden by a pillar that holds up the hayloft, so it probably didn't see me. I watched it run behind the equipment and I waited for it to come out on the other side. But it never did. What came out instead was a man. He was too far away from me to make out the details. He was medium height and moving fast, his gait all jerky and unbalanced like someone trying to find their legs. He ran out from behind the equipment and kept going, heading into the scrubland beyond my property line, and then he was gone. I stood there by the barn with my mouth half opened, not believing what I had seen. Then I went to the stables. The horses were already calming down, returning to their evening calm like nothing had happened. But I checked on each one again anyway. They were fine. They were always fine after the incidences. It was only the fear that lingered, and only in their eyes. I've been thinking about a lot of things since that night. I've been thinking about the coyote that turned into a man. I've been thinking about my grandmother's sister who used to live up near Shiprock before she moved away. She used to tell me stories when I was younger, stories I dismissed since they sounded like hokey folklore. I'm starting to believe them now, since no coyote runs behind equipment and turns into a man. The horses have been spooked 3 more times since then, always at dusk or after dark. Also once during the day, just a skittishness that cleared up after an hour. I haven't seen the man or the coyote again, but I've started on a new fence, 8 feet of chain link, buried 2 feet into the ground. My neighbor thinks I'm crazy. He thinks it's coyotes, just regular coyotes, He thinks the horses are picking up on their scent and getting nervous. He could be right. I might have seen something out of context. I've never believed in skinwalkers, not really. I thought there were stories old people told to keep kids in line. I don't believe that anymore. I don't know what that thing is or why it's interested in my property, but I'm going to finish this fence, and I'm going to hope that when it's done, whatever's out there will decide there's easier hunting elsewhere. Believe this or not, I don't really care, but this happened last year. I'm a university student, and I was heading home from winter break. I wanted to get home as soon as possible, so I was driving through the night on one of the highways up north in Ontario. Winter's brutal this far north, and the roads are mostly empty at this time of night, which I figured would be faster. So I loaded myself to the gills with energy drinks and headed out late on the last day of class. Around 2 a.m., I pulled over at a rest stop that was completely deserted. I had to take a monster piss because of the monsters I had been drinking. There were no lights except what my headlights cast. It was cold enough that my breath was fogging right in front of my face. I started running toward the restroom. I couldn't hold it any longer, but something made me stop mid-stride. I heard someone calling for help. It was faint and tired, maybe from the cold. I called back, figuring maybe someone was stuck or I'd slipped, but there was no response. I slowed down, trying to keep my ears open in case it really was someone in trouble. I was almost to the rest stop door when I heard it again. This time I could tell it was coming from my right, which was where the edge of the rest stop was. There's a small wooded area over there and the dog park. It was pitch black in that direction. I could just make out tree trunks and the weak spill of my headlights. The voice sounded faint and exhausted, like someone had been wandering out there for hours. I didn't want to ignore it. Canadian winters can be deadly. So I started toward the tree line, cautiously, calling out as I went to try and figure out exactly where the voice was. Then it called back, only this time it wasn't the same voice. This time I heard my own voice in the darkness. I froze for a second. All the stories about things mimicking human voices ran through my head. I don't know why I even knew them, but I remembered every warning about following the sound, especially when it's your own. That was enough to make me bolt. I ran back to my car, fumbling with the door and throwing myself inside. My headlights swept the wooded area as I turned out of there, and that's when I saw him. A man standing there in nothing but his birthday suit. His skin looked blue in the pale light, and there was something in his eyes. I can't really describe it, other than it was evil. Like it was pure malice. I didn't see anything else because I slammed the car into drive. The tires fishtailed on the ice, but I kept going. For a few miles, I was hyperventilating until I settled down a bit. I barely noticed the cold, and I certainly didn't feel the need to pee, which I'm only now realizing was a few hours overdue. My brain was hyper-focused on putting distance between me and that rest stop. It wasn't until I was several miles down the road that I started to calm down, and even then, I didn't stop at another gas station or rest stop. I just kept driving another 2 hours until I got home, safe, and locked the door behind me. Then I ran to the bathroom. Out of all the craziness that happened, the one thing I still can't figure out is how I managed to hold my piss that long. But yeah, I think I saw a Wendigo or some kind of mimic. I've been meaning to tell someone about what happened last weekend, because I still don't know what the hell to make of it. We went out to party in the desert about 40 minutes south of Santa Fe, out by where Marcus's cousin has some land. It's out in the middle of nowhere. No neighbors, no cops, no real reason not to just do whatever. We got out there around 8, threw together this bonfire, and started hanging out, drinking some whiskey and beer. Having a really good time and cutting loose with the boys. There were like 6 of us. Me, Marcus, Tyler, Danny, Tommy, and Derek. It was a pretty chill night at first. We had a decent fire going, music playing from someone's speaker, and we were just drinking and talking shit like we always do. Derek was the only one who was really going hard. He'd been going at it since we got there, and by like 9 o'clock he was definitely the drunk one. The rest of us were buzzed, feeling good, but not yet drunk. So we're sitting around the fire maybe an hour in, and Derek starts getting weird. He's standing up, pointing out toward the darkness past the fire, and saying he sees something. And at first we're like, yeah dude, there's nothing out there but coyotes and rocks. We figured it was classic drunk guy shit, but he keeps going on. He's saying there's something by those rocks out there, and he's pointing to the spot maybe 30-40 feet away, where the firelight kind of fades out. He's saying it's a coyote, but it's standing on 2 legs. We're all looking at each other like this guy is toast. Tommy's laughing, telling him to drink some water. Marcus is shaking his head, but Derek won't drop it. He keeps saying the same thing over and over. It's standing on its back legs. It's watching us. Why isn't anyone else seeing this? We all look, but we can't see anything. It's just dark out there. So we figure it could be anything, or it could be nothing. And this goes on for like another 30 minutes. Derek's getting louder, more agitated, and it's kind of killing the vibe. Finally, he runs out of steam and passes out right there in one of the camping chairs. We debated leaving him there for a second, but it was getting cold, so we picked him up and threw him in the backseat of Tyler's car. But not before Derek took a Sharpie marker and wrote something on his face I won't say here. Sucks to be the first person to pass out of the party. We settled back in, got the music going again, and tried to get back into it. It was only 10:30 at this point. So I'm sitting there with the beer, and I noticed this guy walking up from the desert toward our fire. He just walked straight out of the darkness like he'd been out there the whole time. He's shirtless and his skin's all pale and kind of blotchy looking. And he's barefoot in the desert. He was wearing cut-off jean shorts. He had some kind of weird hippie vibe to him, like he's out here living off the land, and he smelled like it too. He had a very gamey scent to him. The guy walks up to the fire like he knows us and asks if we have any whiskey to spare. Everyone kind of goes quiet for a second. Marcus asks him where he came from, and the guy kind of gestures vaguely toward the desert. He doesn't really answer. He asks again about the whiskey. Tommy's like, nah man, we're not really sharing. And the guy just stands there. He doesn't leave. He's just standing on the other side of the fire looking at us. Not in an aggressive way exactly, but like he's waiting for something. The whole vibe was weird. I can't explain it better than that. This guy was quiet and looking at us in a way that made my skin crawl. Marcus offered to walk him back toward the road, figuring maybe he was lost or something. But the guy said he'd rather stick around. He said something about wanting to be near the fire. So we're all sitting there uncomfortable as hell, and Derek starts getting more and more obvious about wanting him to leave. He's like, hey man, we're kind of having a private thing here. And then, seriously, you should probably get out of here. After like 10 minutes of that, the guy finally turns and walks back into the desert. It was crazy. He walks back the way he came like he'd never even been there. The whole party was kind of dead at that point. I'd say it was maybe 5 or 10 minutes after he left when the crow showed up. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this thing was massive. I've seen plenty of crows in my life. This wasn't a crow. I mean, it was shaped like a crow, I guess, but it was huge. The wingspan had to be like 3 or 4 feet across, maybe more. It came in low over the fire squawking like crazy. It was loud and angry. Someone, I think it was Danny, but I'm not totally sure, threw a rock at it trying to shoo it away. But that bird lost it after that. It started diving at us, flying at people's heads and squawking even louder. We were all jumping up and grabbing our stuff and kind of panicking. None of us had been attacked by a bird like that before. We got everyone's things together and piled into the cars. Marcus grabbed Derek out of Tyler's back seat and we left. We didn't even put out the fire properly. We threw water on it and got the hell out of there. Luckily, there's nothing out there to catch fire. On the drive back, nobody really talked about it. We all knew something was weird, but none of us wanted to be the first one to say it. My abuela used to tell stories about things like this, about shamans that walk around in the desert at night. I never really believed her, but I also never asked a lot of questions. Now I'm thinking maybe I should have listened better. I'm a 50-year-old guy. I've worked construction my whole life. I don't usually post stuff like this. I'm kind of reluctant to put myself out here as such. But I figured maybe somebody here has an idea of what happened recently. I inherited a few acres of undeveloped land near Lano, Texas from my uncle. It's out in the middle of nowhere, nothing around but brush, a little creek, and some trees. I figured I'd take a couple days to stay out there in my camper, see if it's worth fixing up or if I should just sell it. The first night I was there, sometime after dark, I started hearing rocks hitting the camper. They were good-sized stones from the field around the place. I saw them the next morning. I grabbed my light and my pistol, which I always keep with me, and went to check. Didn't see a damn thing, but then I heard something run off into the little wooded patch on the property. I thought about chasing it, but I know better than to go running into dense woods at night without knowing what's in there. So I let it go and went back inside. Nothing else happened that night. The next day I walked around the property, checking things out in the daylight. That's when I noticed the tracks. They didn't make sense. At first glance, they looked like deer tracks, but they were huge, way bigger than any deer I've ever seen, and shaped kind of different. The toes were spread out a little more, and they didn't have the right shape for deer. When I was younger, I went up to Montana to hunt mountain goat, and they kind of looked like that, but we don't have mountain goat around here on account of we don't have any mountains. I made my way to the edge of the wooded area, but the brush was thick. It was springtime, so snakes were starting to wake up, and it didn't seem smart to be pushing through that section at this time and unprepared, so I left it alone. That night, as I'm trying to sleep, I hear footsteps outside the camper. They were slow and cautious and not too far off. I just lay there for a while, listening, trying to figure out if it's an animal or what. Then I hear the handle of my camper door jiggle. I grabbed my gun again and moved quietly to the door. I didn't want to hurt whoever it was. I just wanted answers. I pushed the door open and swept the area with my flashlight. To my surprise, there was no one there. I'm about to close the door when I hear something running off towards the woods again. I still couldn't see what it was, but I had to be fast to make it from my door to the woods without me seeing it. The next night, I decided I wasn't going to get caught off guard this time. I stayed up on the couch that faces my camper door as long as I could. It was getting really late, and I was dozing on the couch when I heard it. There were footsteps coming up to the camper. I grabbed the light and the gun, and headed out before it can make any more noise. That's when I saw it. Not sure exactly how tall it was, but taller than me easily. And I'm 6'2". It's moving away from me, kind of running but almost bounding at the same time. Fur all over it, pure white. I couldn't see the face, but I got a really good look at the legs. They were bent backwards, and I swear it had hooves. I stood there for a long moment, watching it move into the brush, and then it was gone. I had to leave the next day to get back to work, so I haven't been back out there yet. I'm torn about what to do with the land. It's a nice spot, quiet and perfect for a retirement home, or at least a weekend cabin. But I don't know what I could do about whatever's living there. I'm not one for chasing monsters, but I don't know what else to call it. Has anyone around Leno or the hill country had anything similar happen? I'm all ears for advice because, right now, this land is more trouble than it's worth to me. You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radion production brought to you by Trapper Dan, the finest in canned survival food.